I'm Dr. Jim Morris.
I'm Dr. Brenna Hassett.
And Brenna, this is the Archaeology of Neanderthals World Cup edition.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh.
So we need to do a little bit of explaining for our listeners. So with us are two of our guest hosts. So welcome, Dr. Jennifer Jones.
Hello, lovely to be back.
And welcome, Dr. Rick Peterson.
Thank you.
And when we decided on this episode, we decided the World Cup's coming up in the summer. What is the final of the World Cup going to be? The final of the World Cup will, of course, be Wales versus Spain. Unfortunately, Wales scuppered that idea by failing to qualify for the World Cup in the playoffs. So
It's unfortunate, but that is why perhaps you should not have a sports-themed archaeology podcast. Just a note for future podcasters.
yeah, I think, well, why let a national side's failure get in the way of a good podcast idea is what I thought about there.
Nothing can stop your podcast ideas, Jim.
Nothing can stop the podcast ideas. But we also have to acknowledge the rocking awesomeness that we've just experienced,
Yes!
which is our new theme tune.
Our brand new theme tune, Dig a Little Deeper.
Amazing.
I love that title. That's great. Such a good title.
Yes! So, composed by Steel. An actual band that is perhaps consisting of someone called Steve and someone called Mel.
Hence, Steel,
Both with archaeological backgrounds, some more recent than others, who have a variety of musical projects, and you can find them on SoundCloud and all other available music sources. But thank you, Steel, for our amazing new theme song.
Yes.
It's incredible. Yeah.
It's great. Other podcasts, they're very plinky plonky. Our
Not for us.
No.
No, we're rock.
Yeah, exactly. That is the vibe that we have.
Very, and especially if we're looking at Neanderthals, rock is an important one.
Jen, that's a great link. That's a wonderful link. So of course, we just had a clip of the awesome song from Steel. But dear listener, if you wait all the way to the end, we will play the full song.
And it is worth the wait.
It is definitely worth the wait. Okay, so we should probably move on to actually some archaeology.
Yeah, so we're on Neanderthals. Or are we? Are we on Neanderthals or Neanderthals? That's time for Jim to alienate people.
It's time for me to say.
Because it's always time for Jim to alienate
I
people.
think I say Neanderthal.
Well,
because that's what the Germans say, and the typeset is in Germany. So
I believe that is the appropriate way to say it. I often say Neanderthal instead, even knowing full well it's incorrect. I'm sorry about that.
It's got a H in it. Though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if that's apparently, dredging in my memory, that is because in 19th century German, the word was written with an H, but the H was never pronounced. So the Tal bit means valley. So it's the Neander Valley in Germany, which is where the original the original type fossil was discovered and identified. But the Germans modified their spelling sometime in the early 20th century and got rid of that H to avoid confusion. But the only people in the archaeological world who paid attention to this are basically the North Americans. Everyone else still spells it with a TH.
I still spell it with a TH.
Yes, yeah. So you spell it with a TH, but you pronounce it Tal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will people be offended if I just still call them Neanderthals?
Someone will somewhere, but that is the joy of archaeology.
I'll join you on that one. I say it that way.
Yeah.
So we've got Spain and Wales represented today, somewhat confusingly.
That's right, yes.
The archaeologist in the Wales talk, he'll be talking about Spain.
Yes, that is the Neanderthals I'm most familiar with. They're the ones I've worked with more. Yeah.
Okay, so run us through. There are Neanderthals in Spain.
There are, yes.
Good.
There's lots of evidence of Neanderthal sites in Spain. So there's a huge number of occupation layers within caves, within other kinds of sites where we've got Neanderthal technology. And we have lots of Neanderthal food remains left behind as well, lots of animal bones from when they've been out hunting. And so we have a huge amount of evidence throughout we say Spain, actually the Iberian Peninsula is probably a better way to talk about it because that also encompasses areas in the south, like Gibraltar. And it also encompasses Portugal, where a huge number of Neanderthal remains have been found as well.
So I'm fully aware that by lumping together, in a World Cup sense, you've just lumped together England, Portugal, and Spain
Into the Iberian Peninsula, yes.
That would be an awesome football team.
Well, you'd have to use Gibraltar, though, not England, because Gibraltar are a FIFA member. And they do have their own.
Gibraltar a FIFA member?
Yeah, they have their own side, so yeah.
I think we've just proven why this is not a football podcast.
But it does finally make sense of why Jim is wearing an England shirt.
There we go.
We're doing a football
I feel
podcast.
you've just opened up your listenership into the footballers as well.
Well, it has to
now.
be said that the presence of Neanderthals in England is a bit feeble, isn't it?
So by comparison, I think many of us are familiar with some of the Neanderthal stuff in Spain. Very well advertised. Wales, not so much.
So I think I would not be able to say with a hand on my heart, as Jen just did, we've got lots of Neanderthal sites in Wales, but we do have some really early ones. So the most important site, archaeological site in terms of the earlier periods in Spain, the lower in Wales, the lower Paleolithic, is a site called Pont Newydd Cave, which is near St Asaph in North Wales, and that's where the only remains of Neanderthals from the UK come from Pont Newydd Cave, and they're mostly teeth. There's 19 teeth, and there's one bit of upper of maxilla with a couple of teeth in situ, which is from a 9-year-old girl, but those deposits are our only skeletal evidence for Neanderthals in Britain at all, so a lot of the rest of the evidence from Britain comes from sites like this big site in Norfolk, for example, in Linford, where we know the Neanderthals were there because there was nobody else in Europe at that time, and someone was there hunting mammoths. So in Wales, we have another site called Coigan Cave down near Larne in Carmarthenshire, which is also got evidence of occupation at this date. So we've got a couple of hand axe, so stone tools, so a couple of Mousterian hand axes from the bottom of the deposits at Coigan Cave. And we know those deposits date down to about 60,000 years ago. So that is kind of peak Neanderthal era. It's right in the middle of what they call a warm stage, an interglacial phase in Europe. So there's a lot of Neanderthal sites in Europe around that date. So Coigan is not unusual in that sense, fits the pattern that you would see everywhere else. Pont Newydd is much, much earlier. So if we counting back, this is probably a good place to think about warm and cold stages. We're in the Ice Age, but the Ice Age is not uniformly cold.
Okay.
So we have climatic fluctuations. We have these very long periods when the climate is as warm as it is today, or sometimes even warmer. And we have these very long cold stages where the climate is really, really, really Arctic. And the easiest way to remember these is we measure the past presence of this climate stuff by looking at isotopes in ice in places like Greenland. And when I was a student, we used to have to learn the names of all these glaciations, and you could never keep them straight in your head. But now they just number them backwards from the past. So we're in marine isotope stage 1, which means it's warm.
Okay.
And then marine isotope stage 2 is the last glaciation, cold. So if it's an even number, it's a glacial. And if it's an odd number, it's a nice warm period. So the Coigan Neanderthals and most of the Neanderthal activity in Europe belongs in marine isotope stage 3. Okay. The Pont Newydd ones belong in marine isotope stage 7. So there's 2 more ice ages between Coigan and Pont Newydd. So that tells you quite how early that is in terms of Neanderthal evolution as a species. It's one of the earliest sites with people who can be defined as being Neanderthal as opposed to some other early hominid species. So that's one of the reasons why it's such an internationally important site. So going back to the question that was originally asked.
We have got Neanderthals in Wales.
We have Neanderthals in Wales, and they're important because there's not many of them, but they're really, they're really early.
So there's some of the earliest we've got in Europe. So
in terms of like definitively being Neanderthals.
Can we put a rough date?
So something around 230,000 years ago for the Pont Newydd ones. There may be some activity in that cave a bit earlier than that, but if you want a pinpoint for that activity, it's probably in the middle of marine isotope stage 7, about 230,000 years ago.
And are those the earliest we've got in Europe, or is there earlier in terms of Neanderthals?
It's a good question.
think people would fight you on that.
Yeah,
Oh,
there are.
okay.
So there's a lot of sort of discussion about when the Neanderthals were around. I think classically they say around 400,000 is some of the early examples. I couldn't tell you what site they're from though.
Yeah, I think the issue as well is that, as is the case with Pont-Newydd as well, is that you're dealing with fragments of remains. So
Yeah.
in Pont-Newydd, you're dealing with teeth. Now, teeth are quite good in terms of identifying if somebody's a Neanderthal or not, because they're one of the diagnostic features of Neanderthal anatomy is a distinctive thing in the tooth, in the root of the tooth, which is a different shape than it is with modern humans.
I have in fact seen that in those Welsh teeth.
In those
Have
teeth,
you?
in the
Yeah,
basement of the National
I
Museum.
was the person who had the big computer that could read CT scans that wasn't actually in the CT lab at the Natural History Museum when they were CT scanned, however many years ago that was. And I have seen that they do in fact have what is called taurodontism.
Yeah.
Which is just basically the the inside bit, the nerve bit of your tooth. If you imagine your tooth has got that sort of hollow bit in the middle, that is super enlarged with much thinner outside white bit enamel in Neanderthals. It's like the classic, have you got a Neanderthal? Let me see its teeth. That is your absolute number one definition.
Yeah.
I love
Or DNA.
Yeah, if you only find one bit of a person, the tooth is the bit you want to
It's a
find.
happy piece.
Yeah.
I think the big theme of season 1 of this podcast is teeth.
It might be the theme of all
the-
seasons, Jim. I think you'll find. But like the whole question about the Neanderthals, sort of, when they start, I think is still very, very much. But a lot of the interesting stuff is happening in Spain, because they've got very early hominins who have quite a lot of similarities with what we later definitely absolutely call Neanderthal.
Right.
So there are now sort of evidence of, I think, genetic links. And some people would like to call things like Cima de los Huesos, which I think goes back to about 700,000. Is that right?
It's super old, that one.
The people want to. Some people would like to call that early Neanderthal. Other people say no. That is definitely its own thing. So this is why you don't get involved in the middle Pleistocene.
Human evolution, there's a huge amount of debate as to what's a new species, what isn't a new species, when one emerges, when one disappears, why all of that happens. It's every new fossil seems to be changing people's
The Middle
minds about
Paleolithic
these
is called the
things.
muddle in the middle for a reason. And there you should fear to tread.
So being the only archaeologist here who hasn't dealt with Neanderthals, my role is to go, what?
But the other useful thing kind of to know about is we're talking about Neanderthal sites.
Yes.
Rick said very few remains in terms of the physical skeletal elements in the Welsh sites. Actually, many sites in Spain, it's not physical Neanderthal bodies we're finding, it's evidence of their occupation.
So it's material culture.
A lot of it is, or food remains, as I said before. So there's not actually that many sites where you do have confirmed fragments of their skeleton. Of their teeth.
So I think we'll get on to the material culture in a little bit. So my understanding is they're European. So this is European Eurasia.
So I tend to talk of them as maybe it's because I'm from Yorkshire. I tend to talk of them as a northern species.
They're the ultimate northern species.
Yeah, so they're adapted to colder conditions in
Right.
general, due to quite a lot of physiological things. So it means that they can survive better than quite a lot of other species in slightly cooler places.
But you've got Neanderthals, for instance, in Denisova, which is
Yeah.
way off in...
Yeah.
So like...
So they expand all the way over to
They're not an African species is the
Right.
important thing.
yeah.
Okay.
That's-
So northern, not African species, but they
And
must have.
genetically, we know that they don't have connections with species
Okay.
from the southern areas.
So they must have evolved from a previous Homo species.
One would hope.
One would hope.
Yeah.
So who have Neanderthals evolved from?
There's again, this is the human evolution highly contentious. But if you want to simplify it enormously, I think the origin species for both Neanderthals and us is Homo heidelbergensis,
Right.
which is another Middle Pleistocene fossil.
If you believe in Homo
Yeah, but
heidelbergensis,
then-
which some people do not.
Yeah.
How can you not believe in a species?
Or if you're from the Iberian Peninsula, Homo antecessor would be one that might be.
So this all has to do with Linnaean naming fights and which species sort of, has the right to determine the name. So when the first find, so like Neanderthal, we get the name from the first find being in the Neander Valley. Wasn't actually the first Neanderthal found. It's the first one kind of identified, but that's...
The very first one was Angus 2 from Belgium.
Yeah, so it
And people didn't recognise it.
Angus, well, I don't know what the Belgian is for cave. Angus cave species, I don't know.
I'm pleased it's not that, because I think it's a bit harder to talk about.
I mean, I think the key thing here, actually, rather than getting hung up on the Linnaean name of the species, is to think about the kind of humans that they were. So... sort of more broadly within human evolution, you've got these things of like some things happen. So you have species that habitually walk upright, for example. And what's happening around the time that all these species are existing that are ancestral, all these different things that are identified as being ancestral to Neanderthals and us, is they're talking about species that have got essentially a modern body plan. So they stand upright and they've got the same sort of body that we have and that Neanderthals have. But where they're different, and this again is an area where there's a lot of grey area depending what fossils you look at, but where they're different is in terms of the size of their brains, essentially, isn't it? In terms of what is going on from the...
And it's interesting they make that point about them kind of being similar to modern humans. They have a lot of shared characteristics, and that's actually why they weren't recognised as a species that was independent of modern humans initially, because they look so similar. So there was a lot of discussion about some of the early examples that had been found being pathological human specimens.
Okay.
So there's discussions about them being, they're probably human, but they look a little bit strange. Maybe they've got some kind of injury or illness to them. And that's why it took quite a while for them to be independently
And then there's the converse of that, which is one of the very first Neanderthal specimens that people looked at did in fact have considerable spinal pathologies. And so they looked at this and said, oh, well, cavemen must have all had this horrible lumbering walk like monsters. And it's just, no, this one poor Neanderthal had a trashed spine. That doesn't mean the whole species had trashed spines. It's a little bit like sort of taking, an X-ray from, a very elderly sort of, person with a hunched spine and things and going, yeah, this is what all humans look like.
But this is one of the human evolution challenges, isn't it? You're working with so few examples that sometimes things can get overblown in terms of representation of what people are seeing. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, the example from the Welsh cave was a bit of mandible and some teeth.
Yeah.
And you're reconstructing a whole
if you didn't have all the Neanderthal fossils, you wouldn't know necessarily to put those fossils in a different species, because you would just think, well, their teeth are a bit weird, aren't they? Yeah. But it's the fact that they're a bit weird in the same way as all other Neanderthal teeth that gives you that thing. And actually something vaguely similar happened with the Denisova site that you're talking about, where they didn't pick up on the fragmented remains being a member of a different species until they had a full DNA sequence for Neanderthals, and they said, hang on, these guys are they're genetically not the same. There's the different species. So you finish up with a species that's identified genetically before it's been identified as a fossil, which is interesting.
And then we have really interesting examples as well at Denisova, haven't we, of mixed parentage of Neanderthals and modern.
I mean, these are all kissing cousins. Like at some point, you have to ask what species really means, because we obviously have evidence. We've all commented on having European ancestry and therefore probably having some sort of DNA admixture from Neanderthals somewhere in the past. But okay, so if it doesn't really matter where they came from, we're not bothered with the middle right now. But so what I want to Spain versus Wales. Let's bring the competitive aspect back.
Yes. We had a whole theme for the podcast.
There was a theme. This is far too collaborative. So okay, Spanish Neanderthals, all of them. So what are they doing? How are they living?
They have quite varied diets depending on where in the Iberian Peninsula they're living. So I spent quite a lot of time looking at the ones in the Cantabrian region, so the northern coast. They spent a lot of time eating red deer. That was the dominant food source that they were eating. So they were hunting them in different valleys, sometimes going a few valleys over to capture them. We know this from isotope information that shows a lot of variety in what we're seeing. So we're seeing them eating a lot of red deer in that region. In other parts of the Iberian Peninsula, we've got Neanderthals that hunted lots of rabbits. So they have this kind of a specialisation in rabbits in some locations. Some places where they're eating fish. So their diet's relatively varied, and they're making use of what's in the local vicinity of their sites, really. If you go to other places, so over more towards the northeast of Spain, we see them eating quite a lot of horses. So Monica, who's working with me at the minute, is currently busy in the lab sampling lots of horse teeth from Neanderthal sites over in the Catalonian region. So there's they're really getting what's available locally, and shows quite a lot of flexibility really in their ability to adapt.
But that shows quite a lot of different hunting techniques as well, doesn't it? So red deer, horse, rabbit, fishing.
Yeah.
They're all so kind of, do we have evidence of different hunting tools and things?
We have. So I can tell you this is actually from sites in France where a lot of the evidence comes
what
from.
France coming from? Yeah.
It's super cool.
They were knocked out in the last 16.
This is my top tip, Jim, for the World Cup. So we have evidence of them in France using interception hunting, so waiting for herds that are migrating of reindeer to come through.
So what's how do we know that? What's the evidence for that?
We know this from things like the season of death of which they're being taken from. So the reason I know about these is because it's through the isotope record showing us that there's a culling at a particular season. So it's always happening, same time of year. So it seems to be on that mass migration route. We do have evidence of them sometimes using spears for hunting. Who knows how they caught the rabbits, but they did it, and they did it in number.
Well, that was it. I had this image of, because I'm thinking of the classic kind of stone axe, and some poor person trying to get a rabbit with a stone axe. It's just running after
Fred
it.
Flintstone versus Bugs Bunny. Yes.
I wonder though if they had maybe more sophisticated things that just don't preserve archaeologically. I could quite believe them using things like nets or using
there's
fibers.
There's a lot of chat now, I think, about how much they could manipulate different fibers, and once you've got string, you've got rabbits.
Yeah, you just need to put a little trap by the burrow, and hopefully
maybe an upturned laundry basket.
Yes.
With a little stick. I'm not sure Jim's going to survive.
Do we need an Acme anvil in that picture as well?
All right. Well, Jim's not surviving in the wild, but okay. So varied environmental adaptations to specific different kind of local ecosystems, presumably.
Yeah, different strategies depending on where they're living, what is locally most plentiful. They're going for it.
So Wales, please come back and contest.
So similar sort of pictures. Well, I think the key thing we're getting out of this is we're talking about flexibility. Mm-hmm. So the evidence from Wales is perhaps the best way of looking at that evidence of flexibility is look at the things that stone tools. So the site at Coigan, there are hand axes, which are they're relatively large. These are things that are produced from the beginning of the Paleolithic onwards, and they're a tool which is used not so much for the hunting, but for the butchery. They're a butchery tool. Okay. So they were produced in large numbers in early Paleolithic sites, and they're still used on some Neanderthal sites and not in others. So there's quite a lot of debate, or was quite a lot of debate, about that transition between using this single type of technology, what they call the biface or the hand axe, which is a thing which looks basically, it's like a giant leaf-shaped thing about the size of your hand, produced quickly, used for skinning and butchery, or more sophisticated or more complicated techniques where you generate a series of flake tools by preparing a core in a certain way, and then you've got a raw material core which you can bash off and produce lots and lots of sharp edges quickly, and you've got lots of reusable tools. Mm-hmm. Now, more widely speaking, that's often regarded as a kind of transition point. So, at some point, Neanderthals get smart enough to ditch the hand axe and pick up the flake tools. But actually, at Pont Newydd, what we see is people responding to the available raw materials, because there's not a lot of flint in North Wales. So you're dealing with different volcanic rocks which flake in more broadly similar ways. So what you get there is people, Neanderthal people who left the assemblage there, they're responding to the raw material. If we can make what we call the Valois core, which will produce these flakes of it, they'll do that. And we'll see evidence of that. But in the same deposits, if it doesn't work like that, they'll make a hand axe instead. They'll make a biface instead. So there's evidence that in terms of the hunting and the butchery practice, they are being very, very flexible, depending on what raw materials are available to them in the environment. Whereas down in the south at Koigen, they've got the raw materials to make hand axes. They make hand axes down to about 60,000. You see, so there's clear evidence there of the same sort of things you're seeing in the isotopes and the animals, of like you would expect people to be adapting to their environment and to survive in that way because of those things.
Well, that's the kind of issue that people often bring up, and because there are no Neanderthals present to take part in this debate today, they are not fielding a team in the World Cup. They have been, in fact, knocked out for some time.
They were eliminated early on.
Wow.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. But I mean, so that level of flexibility is often the subject of debate. Is, are Neanderthals close enough to us that cognitively they have this flexibility that we attribute to our own species, and we say we're so clever, we can adapt to anything, that's why we're the number one hominin. But a lot of I feel like the recent research trends have been trying to demonstrate.
I mean the key thing, I think, certainly traditional pictures of the Neanderthals was that they were very, very physically very well adapted to the harsh environment of these ice age periods in Europe. So they have the physical adaptations and we have the mental adaptations, if you like. And so when we come along, we outsmart them. Now that, as you've said, there's been a lot of pushback against that in terms of understanding the flexibility of Neanderthals, understanding, as they understand their genome, understanding where they share key genetic markers around things like language processing, things like that with modern humans. So I think most people who work with Neanderthals now would expect you to have an understanding of their capabilities, which is very much more similar to ours than we would have said perhaps 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is a species that is highly adaptable.
Yeah.
And also they're living through glaciations and then warm periods.
And we see, like from the hunting evidence, to do what they're doing in terms of interception hunting, you have to be collaborative. You have to work with others. You have to communicate successfully with others.
Yeah.
This brings me to a very important question, which I believe Jim is going to help me with.
Well,
so there are debates about Neanderthal communication.
Yeah.
These are the best debates because sometimes they result in live reconstruction of what Neanderthal communication might have sounded like. So there was a lot of debate, particularly early on. I feel like the question is more settled now, but we can get into that. But one of the very first, and I'd say the most memorable, attempts to reconstruct whether or not Neanderthals could speak involved looking at the structure of the bones of the throat, particularly the hyoid, its placement, considering Neanderthal anatomy, and how the broad, deep chest and the placement of the tongue and the placement of the hyoid would have made a Neanderthal sound. And at some point, I believe the BBC got a paid voice actor to reconstruct a sound that Jim was actually kind enough to make earlier. Jim, do you want to demonstrate what the BBC Neanderthal sounded like?
So my understanding is broad chests, actually quite powerful kind of lungs in the Neanderthal. They've got a wide nasal passage, so they can take a lot of air in. But then their hyoid is structured quite differently to ours, if I'm correct on that.
It was placed differently.
Placed differently. And it would be somewhere along the lines of, "Hello, I'm a Neanderthal."
That is completely accurate, I believe.
I think Jim will hopefully be putting the link to the video so you can see that for yourselves.
We will put the link to the video, yeah. So, and they had Neanderthals kind of singing. So I'm not going to try and sing like a Neanderthal. Well, maybe I should.
Steve Mythen thought they only hummed, which I think is an even more interesting idea. Yes. And I don't think anyone goes with that now.
I'm going to try that now. Hold on.
That sounds very, very convincing.
I think, yeah,
Absolutely nailed it, Jim.
I'm not sure how do you organize like interception hunting a red deer.
It's like over there.
Oh dear.
I'm not sure how many red deer would have been brought down by that.
No,
So there is more modern research that has looked at perhaps some other things, other capacities, the genetics that Rick mentioned earlier.
So the FOXP2 gene is the one that's famously mentioned, isn't it?
Yeah,
as
I mean, the
something,
thing that always gets forgotten in this, I think, is that actually making a noise with your mouth is only one way of having a language.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the fact that you've got a language processing gene is perhaps the more important thing than the precise anatomy of the hyoid and everything like that, because we don't know what other, kinds of complex communication there might have been there in terms of things like sign language or things like that. So,
We're not going to mention Gene Oil again, but that book suggests that it was a sign language based component.
And Jean Owl, who wrote Clan of the Cave Bear, for anyone who does not know, I will bring this up repeatedly, but she actually funded quite a lot of early evolutionary meetings. She was present at a lot of the evolutionary the Society for Human Evolution, the European Society for Human Evolution meetings, and I think some meetings at ASU. And if you look at the back of some of these published volumes, there's actually Jean Owl, famous author of what perhaps would be called spicy Neanderthal fiction.
Yeah, I would describe it as that.
Book Talk would love it. But she actually, so she was very right on hybrids during the 80s when people absolutely did not believe that human Neanderthal hybrids existed. She was right on a lot of things.
And I think it's completely reasonable that they might well have used, as Rick was saying, other forms of communication that was more visual.
Well, if you look at kind of hunter-gatherer groups, then actually, especially groups that are kind of hunting animals almost through kind of exhaustion, where they're kind of chasing the prey down, they're not actually talking. They're using sign language. They're using, they're communicating to each other, but they're not actually using any kind of words in there.
They are talking when they get home, though.
Well, when they get home, yes.
Yeah. But I think it's an interesting point that you were making about Jean Auel's work is that there's actually, if you look at other fiction about Neanderthals that was published in the 70s and 80s, which at the time was absolutely lambasted for being way over the top in terms of the capacities of the Neanderthals. All of that stuff, now the dial is shifted on the academic stuff to bring it much more in line with what's going on. The BBC Jackanory, when I was a kid, used to have this regular thing of books by a guy called John Grant, kids' books about a Neanderthal called Little Nose. And they got a really snotty review in Antiquity in about 1982, which said that this is rubbish. How can we have kids' books that are so fundamentally wrong about all the basics of Neanderthal life? But nearly everything that Antiquity slagged him off for getting wrong has subsequently turned out to be fine.
Little Nose justified.
Yeah.
Wow. We'll put a link into Little Nose as well. We'll try and find a link into that.
But I think this is the thing, is that sort of Neanderthals go through cycles because we're fascinated by them, because they're sort of us but not us, and we get to project on them.
And there is that element of they became extinct as we were, as modern humans were coming into their own, really. And so there is that sort of...
Do we think that modern humans ever occupied Wales near enough to Neanderthals? Presumably they were gone.
We think not, because the early evidence for modern human occupation is round about 30,000. So 30,000 years ago. And then our last evidence for Neanderthals at Coigan is 30,000 years earlier than that, really. So no, in Wales, it doesn't look like there's a great deal of overlap. But there's a different story in other parts of Europe where you've definitely got... Yeah.
So in Wales, that's because of the glaciations, I assume.
Yeah. So actually, it's true of the whole of Britain. We've got this big gap when there's just literally nobody here.
Because we're just underneath
It was covered
ice.
up,
My way of doing anything.
It really limits what you can where you can go there. Yeah.
So what about Spain?
So if we look to Spain, so the region that I've worked more in the Cantabrian region, we do have about a possible gap of about 1,000 years in between the two species. It all depends on what sort of models of your dates that you're looking at. So there might well have been a little bit of an overlap, but we don't see it within archaeological resolution that we
I was going to say,
have.
is it actually our resolution isn't fine enough to basically find the cave with the two species living
Well,
together.
we have sites where we have distinct levels that have Mousterian and Neanderthal technology, then modern human technology. We don't, in that part of Spain, we don't really have much of the transitional industries that sometimes are discussed as being where you have got possibly the two together, or you've got a species that's making a technology that's reminiscent of the other. So we don't tend to have that in that area, but that's not to say that in other parts of Europe you don't see that. So it's kind of like patchwork, mosaic-y.
I mean, it's back to this thing about flexibility again, isn't it? Is that, we can, if we have this vision that Neanderthals have to make certain kinds of technology because they're Neanderthals, but then that's not necessarily true. We can see the ability for them to adapt and to do different things, and same with modern humans to adopt things that they've seen. I mean, we know the two species interacted because that's why modern humans in everywhere outside of sub-Saharan Africa have got about 3% Neanderthal DNA. So there's an element of interaction there.
And my understanding of the DNA is actually there's certain traits that are Neanderthals. So I suppose that if you are an early riser, a morning person, that is linked to a Neanderthal, a specific Neanderthal gene.
This does sound a little bit like Instagram science, though, doesn't it?
now, admittedly, as the archaeologist that hasn't dealt with Neanderthals, I found that out through Google. Other search engines are available.
I mean, there are traits certainly that I think there are things involved with immune response.
So Neanderthals had the same blood group system that we have, the ABO blood group system. So clearly a lot of similarities with that. We know that from the genetics.
Useful to know if one ever ends up in hospital.
You can get a transfusion from one side.
Yeah.
Or if you were in some sort of like sci-fi time traveling situation, and you had an injured Neanderthal to nurse back to health, then you could save them.
You would have to develop blood transfusions from first principles with a Mousterian handout.
You would have your giant time traveling pod with you with all this like high-tech
This is a
kit.
Doctor Who episode, isn't it?
My favourite, though, is the fact that some Neanderthal DNA shows that some of them had red hair. So that's quite a nice little...
Red hair, occasional freckles.
Yeah.
But I think there's slightly different pathways than they are in... So the red hair is just... It turns out evolution needs to invent red hair a lot.
Okay.
Like, I think it's
a lot of it's to do with the ability to absorb vitamin D. So if you're in a northern latitude, you have less vitamin D available. That's why the British government tells us all to take vitamin D tablets in the winter. So you need to have adaptations that allow you then to be able to absorb more of it. And part of that is to do with your skin being more receptive to it. Often it's paler skin that can take that, and that is also then linked often to things like hair colour too.
So that links us quite nicely actually to our photo that we've got up. So Brenna, do you want to explain? Because you took this photo.
This is my photo, actually. This is back at the opening of the Natural History Museum's Human Evolution Gallery. And I was privileged to be at random amounts of coffee discussions while the team who developed the exhibition was deciding how to decorate, create, and dress Ned.
Ned.
Well,
Yes.
I think they made the right call with the Alice band.
Yeah, this was the most fun thing. It's the most fun I've ever had working in a museum, is how to dress up your Neanderthal doll. So the Kennis brothers are these amazing sculptors who do quite a lot of museum quality reconstructions. And so they had, what we did is, I think this is Spee, the Belgian Neanderthal fossil that was CT scanned. They used that as like a framework, a scaffolding to put on flesh, to put on bones, to do the face. They took quite a bit of artistic license with the face. You can't see it in this picture, but this Neanderthal actually has blue eyes. Bright blue eyes, and is slightly winking because the face is in fact modelled off of a very famous actor who's most famous for playing Bond.
Oh,
he does have a look of him, doesn't he?
Sean Connery.
Slightly Sean
I
Connery.
quite like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually going thinking, it's, as Neanderthals go, it's a good-looking Neanderthal.
Yeah. Much like Sean Connery.
Yeah.
I don't think that's suggesting Sean Connery is a Neanderthal. It is just that Ned is maybe a little bit, tiny bit based off of. But so Ned's got body paint, got body markings, and he's got an Alice band. So these are all actually major interpretive questions. can Neanderthals manipulate skins and things in order to create clothing? I mean, I think most people
would say probably
I think
yes.
that's reasonable, yes.
I mean, if you think about some of the cold weather they're living through, then yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be very unreasonable not to have.
Yeah. You can't hunt rabbits and not have clothes.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of...
But and then, you know, but by the time you get to body paint and things, so we know that there are actually, you know, ochre is being used. There is some sort of pigment
Yeah.
in existence. There's red ochre in and around some body deposits. Do we call them burials?
Well, this is a thing where we've got evidence from both places that will, so the wider question of like the Neanderthal mental world, if you like, in terms of things like art. So Pont Newydd may well be an example of a site of what we call funerary caching. So that's the sense of like this idea that the bodies are getting to the place that they are because dead bodies are being repeatedly brought to the same place and left there. So that is something along a spectrum that we would regard as something like a modern funerary behaviour. The complication with Pont Newydd, going back to the Mile of Ice conversation, is that it only survives because it's the underground portion of a much longer cave system, which was ground off in the subsequent 3 glaciations after that. So we're not dealing with the deposits that were where they were left with the Neanderthals left the bodies, or indeed where they left their tools. We're dealing with what happens when meltwater from subsequent glaciations washes material through these cave systems and it winds up getting trapped. So a big part of my work on Pont Newydd site was to spend ages unpicking the statistics of where things were to try and reconstruct where they might have originally been when they were deposited. But one of the things that we did identify is that we thought that all of the human remains from Pont Newydd had been originally deposited in a single location, somewhere near the original entrance of the cave. So that would be something that would fit in with that. There's been quite a lot of work done on primate responses to death generally, and so this idea of a location where people bring their dead to and leave them there, that's something which looks like it's a Neanderthal behaviour, and indeed a behaviour we see in hominids that are earlier, evolutionarily earlier than Neanderthals as well.
In Spain, so I mentioned how quite a lot of the sites in the Iberian Peninsula, we don't have huge numbers of Neanderthal remains. There's a couple of places, so I think Cueva de las Palomas has a Neanderthal body that has been deliberately posed, which you could say suggests intentional, potentially symbolic burial.
Yeah, and the late ones in sort of places like Mount Carmel in Israel, there's some in actual holes in the ground.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like Shanidar, they argue that some of those are the last one.
Yeah. So there's certainly more and more evidence suggesting, I mean, a lot of it people have tried to argue for and against, and you could, as an archaeologist, you could use the evidence in either way, but there is more and more suggestion, isn't there, that there's intentional burial.
But we do have another post-death treatment that we should talk about. Spain, explain yourself.
So one of the most famous sites in recent years from Spain is in the site of El Cedron in Asturias, which is, it's funny you were mentioning how sort of wash deposits brought things into Pont Newydd. Well, in El Cedron, it's a deposit where there seems to have been a big storm event, and a large collection of hominin remains, Neanderthal remains, ended up in these deep deposits. So there's thousands of Neanderthal fragments in there. There's about 13 different individuals have been found today. Minimum number, I should say. There's quite a lot more fragments. And they do suggest quite an interesting post-mortem treatment. So there's a couple of examples of things like cut marks on the mandible. Yeah. So cut marks in themselves, as I love telling my undergraduate students, cut marks in themselves don't always mean that something was consumed. So you can remove the flesh from an individual's body for a variety of post-mortem treatment reasons. Sometimes it could be symbolic and important rite. Sometimes it can be from consumption. What's a little bit more damning is the fact that there are Neanderthal bones that have been intentionally cracked open. We know that because of the pattern of fracture shows that it was fractured when the bone was fresh, likely for marrow extraction. It's harder to say that isn't done for nutritional reasons.
They're making Neanderthal stew.
I don't think they predicted a storm. It's not like a giant cold.
I feel like I have to kind of justify this a little bit further as well and say that usually examples of this, when we see people nutritionally consuming other people, it's frequently due to lack of other resources being around. It's due to people maybe going through times of stress and struggle. So the suggestion has been that it was a particularly challenging time, and that is why.
Okay.
So this is one of these cases of nutritional cannibalism rather than it being a particular part of a right that you should eat some portion of the body, which is something that you also see with modern human populations, isn't it? So that again, that's like it's part of an array of different behaviours, isn't it? Because obviously it's not the case that modern humans don't eat people on occasion either. So
that's very true. We can't really. Yeah. Who are we to judge our Neanderthals?
So I think that sort of range of different responses, again, the flexibility. But of course, the thing about the late Neanderthals in Spain is that they're very last of the
some of the latest that you do get. So I think that's partly why the suggestion is, as the environment was changing, as resources became maybe less plentiful, that might have been why people were forced into that.
So this is our fault. So we are resource-wise taking up the resources and
the environment is changing quite radically at that time as well. So it's not just Neanderthals that go extinct in that broad window. There's a lot of megafauna that vanish in the same.
This brings us back to our cave bear episode.
A little bit, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, ref.
What
are you going to call it?
I think eating is like a red card offence. If
you have eaten your con-specifics, you will be asked to leave the field.
If in the middle of the final, one of the players starts consuming another one, I think that's.
I think, you know what?
It's against FIFA rules, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's definitely against. Even FIFA would frown on that.
Yeah. I'm sure there are circumstances you could get around it.
Yeah. I mean, if you paid a large amount of money.
I think if you were willing to pay the fine.
Yeah, it'd be fine, yeah. It's just like,
it's probably a 3-match ban, though, isn't it?
3-match,
They'll be back in MIS -5, I think that means. Right. Well, I think we've had thank you Spain, thank you Wales.
Do we have to decide now? Is this because this is
because I think it's just always going to be a tie because we're is archaeology finished? Like the game's not finished.
Yeah, and both locations have some incredibly cool sites.
So.
And work is still going on. There's still more work in Wales. There must be more Neanderthals in the UK.
Yes, although the preservational qualities of Portnawi are quite special. So it's one of those things where you would not necessarily. It's very unusual to get that level of preservation. Certainly, I mean, the Paleolithic in Wales was very, very poor before the 70s in terms of our understanding. It was only really with a major series of research excavations by Stephen Holthouse Green at the National Museum that broadened that picture, and that's where Portnawi came from, along with just about everything.
Disappointing. Spain will still come up with things. I think there's still a lot of
there's huge excavations. Absolutely, yeah.
And tons coming.
I mean, if we continue the football kind of podcast theme, then basically we've reached half time. One of the Spanish players has been sent off for eating another Spanish player. So they're down to. I mean, I suppose they could substitute the one that's been eaten. But they're down to 10 men. And
I think Wales is going to take it on penalties.
I think so. Wales are doing well.
Well done, Wales.
Although the record in penalty shootout is perhaps not something to look into.
Let's not draw too many comparisons.
Yes.
Right, is that the end of season 1?
It is. So dear listener, if you've reached this point and you're still with us after the
really
football,
seriously well done.
really seriously well
Points.
done.
Shout out to our Jenna.
Jenna,
who was liked and commented. Appreciated, thank you.
Yeah, so many people have liked and commented the show, but Jenna on YouTube has commented the most. So we wanted to do a special shout out to Jenna and thank them for commenting on many of our episodes. Hopefully, people have been entertained but also learnt something.
Yeah, and I think there probably will be a season 2. won't
We are,
there?
yes. We've agreed. We're going to do a season 2. We'll be back bigger, better, stronger.
We've got some guests from outside the department who are going to come in,
Yeah.
but there's still time. If you want a niche archaeological subject explained, why not ask? Drop a comment. Maybe we'll actually cover it. We know some weird things.
We do. Yes. So please do put in the comments if there's topics you'd like us to explore. And also, what questions you want us to ask our guests, because we've been asking the gold question.
Yeah.
So if there's a question you'd like us to ask our guests for season 2, then put that in the comments as well, please.
Yeah. Otherwise, I've been Dr. Brenna Hassett.
And I've been Dr. Jim Morris.
And this has been the Archaeology of Neanderthal World Cup.